Okay, class. So today we are here to discuss the syllabus that we have for economics and Indian economy, and we are also going to see some previous year questions. So that is going to enrich your understanding about the syllabus that UPSC has, both for prelims examination and also for economy section of GS3 paper. You are free to ask questions, so I'm going to answer that also. Economics and Indian economy, analysis of syllabus and previous year questions. Let us see. I'm going to come back to the questions and the syllabus part time and again. Firstly, let us see. Let us have a glimpse over the syllabus that we have. So for prelims, if I talk about the prelims, then this is the syllabus. Okay, economic and social development, then sustainable development, poverty, inclusion, demographics, social sector initiatives. Okay, economic and social development. I provided the heading for this discussion today. The heading was economics and Indian economy. And now see what we have in the syllabus. Economic and social development. So it is economic development that has been given in the syllabus. Then sustainable development, the very basic definition you all might be knowing, although we'll come to that also. Then poverty, inclusion, demographics, and social sector initiatives. Actually, uh, this is not for economics as such. This is in general. So this is the syllabus that we have for prelims. No term like economics has been used here. Yes, economics as the term has not been used. I'll come to the syllabus again. Let us see the main syllabus. This is General Studies 3, Technology, Economic Development, Biodiversity, Environment, Security and Disaster Management. Okay, so this is the section that we are going to deal with, economic development. And just have a look over it. We are going to analyze the syllabus after some time, but let us have a look. It is Indian economy and issues related to planning, mobilization of resources, growth and development, employment, then inclusive growth. You may see that this is actually the repetition. Uh, the same thing was there in prelims also, and economic development also. Then the government budgeting. Here UPSC has tried to become slightly explicit by giving a particular topic in main section, and then after that it is major cropping patterns in various parts of the country, then different types of irrigation and irrigation system, storage, transport, marketing of agriculture and produce, issues related to constraints, e-technology in the area of farmers, and these are the issues related to direct and indirect farm subsidies. Again, just notice that the term economics has not been used here. Okay, so term economics has not been used. So what is the relevance of economics there? Many times, the experience that I have uh, of teaching and guiding the students, generally, if they don't have the background in economics, they are scared of this particular section. But I just want you to notice that in nowhere in the syllabus the term economics has been used. Okay, so the thing that you have to keep in mind is this, that UPSC is not very much interested in testing your knowledge of economics as a discipline, which involves model building, theorization, and all. It is about economic development. So that is the first thing that you need to take note of. Now, coming to the basics of this particular subject, and then I will come to the syllabus again. So what I'm trying to emphasize is this, that the economic development is actually something that you have to focus upon in order to prepare well for prelims examination. I'm talking about the economy section of the prelims examination and economy section of GS3. Okay, if you talk about the weightage of this section in prelims examination, so it is somewhere around minimum 15 to sometimes 23, 24 questions have also been asked. So it ranges from 15 to 23, 24. On some years, it has been seen that, for example, in year 2020, number of questions reached to somewhere around 23. So 24, 23 questions appeared from this section. So almost 1/4 of the question paper in prelims examination was from this section. Okay, just 4 or 5 lines that you have just seen in prelims examination syllabus. When it comes to mains examination, almost 50%, or sometimes more than 50% of GS3 paper is from this section. So it is a very important section, no doubt about that. It is very important, and the preparation for this particular section is actually very much required for scoring good. First, for clearing the prelims stage of the examination, then scoring very good marks in GS paper 3. Okay, let us see the most basic thing about subject. The most basic thing, I said that it is economy, economics, and Indian economy. Okay, so this is something that we have to focus upon. Syllabus does not mention the word economics, but whatever has been mentioned in the syllabus is part of economic development. And in order to assess economic development, you need to have basic knowledge of economics. Okay, I'll come back to this particular thing, uh, the difference between economics and Indian economy, uh, uh, and that will be very much comprehensible to you. First, focus on economics. Okay, let us see what is economics and why do we need to study it. What is economics? How to define economics? First of all, we need to understand the subject that we are going to cover and why that is significant and why it has been included or made part of the UPSC syllabus. So that is the logic that we have to understand here. What is economics? In most simple terms, it has been defined as the study of production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services. This is the most simple definition that you will have of this particular discipline, that is economics, in any book or if you surf the internet. Okay, generally it has been defined in such a way. But the question arises that why we need to go for such kind of a study? Why to study the production, distribution, consumption of goods and services? Okay, so answer to this question is this, that we are kind of compelled, the economists are the people who are kind of compelled to go for the study of the production, distribution, or consumption of goods and services because of this basic fact that resources in the society are always scarce. So there is always the scarcity of resources. There is always the scarcity of resources which necessitates the study of production, distribution, consumption of goods and services. What happens when there are scarce resources? Understand that when any particular resource is existing in nature, in any geography, in any region, in a limited quantity, then we cannot go on utilizing that resource in unqualified manner or in infinite way. So there is a limitation related to its uses that makes it necessary or that necessitates the study of production, distribution, production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services. Because if resources are limited in nature, then we cannot go on utilizing them in infinite manner. We need to go for maximum possible utilization. Okay, so because of the scarcity of the resources, we need to go for optimum allocation. Optimum allocation. Now, another term which might be difficult initially. Optimum allocation simply means most efficient utilization of resources. Understand what is the link here. As I said, that resources in the society are scarce. There is always the scarcity of resources. And because of this scarcity, opportunity cost is involved in the utilization. Uh, for example, for example, you have 100 logs of wood. Okay, 100 logs of wood. For example, you have 5 hours of time with you, 5 hours of time at your disposal. Now you can utilize that 5 hours of time in watching Netflix or in watching Hotstar, or in watching movies or uh, web series. But when you utilize that 5 hours in watching Netflix or web series, you lose the opportunity to utilize the same amount of time for studying. So it might be that you might have completed, say, complete Yojana magazine in that 5 hours, but you lost the opportunity because you utilized that 5 hours time, 5 hours resource, uh, which was at your disposal in watching web series. Okay, so because of the opportunity cost, because if you use any particular resource for any particular purpose, you actually lose the opportunity to utilize that much resource for any other purpose. And that is why you need to go for optimum allocation. If there would have been unlimited amount of resource in the society or in any country or region, then there would not have been any requirement for their optimum allocation. You can go on utilizing the resources in unlimited manner because they exist in unlimited quantity. Okay, so optimum allocation becomes necessary, it becomes compulsory, because of this very fact that resources are always scarce in society. Okay, are you getting it? So I think this is clear. So study of the production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services becomes necessary because of the scarcity of resources. Because of the scarcity of resources. Why? Because if resources are scarce, then there is opportunity cost involved in their utilization. That simply means that if you use any particular resource for any particular purpose, you lose the opportunity to use that resource for any other purpose. Okay. Optimum allocation would ensure the most efficient utilization of that resource. Okay, so economics as a discipline is actually concerned with the study of production, distribution, consumption of goods and services because it needs to go for optimum allocation, because there is a need for optimum allocation. And that need arises because of a basic fact, unchanging fact, that resources are always scarce in any geography or in any region. Okay. Now, this is about the basic thing of economics as a discipline, that it is a study of production, distribution, goods, and services. Uh, the question arises that this study takes place at a situation where the resources are scarce. So, it is actually the study in a situation of scarcity of resources. What I mean to say here is this, that because of this, because of this compulsion, economics becomes actually the science of decision making in a situation of scarcity. Okay, so who are the economists then? Economists are the people who are going to take very important decisions, very important. They are going to arrive at a decisions in a situation of scarcity. Okay, now this is how the economics as a discipline is defined. But if I ask you that what is the purpose of doing all this? What is the purpose of study of production, distribution, consumption of goods and services? Okay, agreed that it is because of the scarcity of resources. But ultimately, what economics is trying to do through optimum allocation, through most efficient utilization of resources, economics actually attempts to maximize human welfare. Okay, so when optimum allocation as an objective is set, it's the objective of most efficient utilization of resources is set. Its purpose, its ultimate purpose or ultimate objective is to maximize human welfare. So economics as a discipline seeks to maximize the well-being of humans. Okay, the welfare of human beings. So that is ultimate purpose of economics, and that is actually why and how economists indulge in policy making formulation. Okay, so policy making, formulation, execution, and all. So ultimate purpose is definitely public welfare or increasing the well-being of humans. And when you are going to become administrator, you must have the knowledge of this discipline, the basic knowledge, the basic understanding of this discipline, because you are going to become part of that body which actually directly deals with the maximization of the welfare of public at large. Okay, so this is economics. Now, coming to another basic thing, and then we'll move to the syllabus and we'll also analyze some previous year questions. Um, if this is the definition of economics, then what is the subject matter? What is the subject matter? The domain of this discipline. Understand. Here I'm going to talk about the subject matter of economics. Okay, because this is important. This deals with most basic things here. Okay, I'll tell you about the best books and all. First, let us see the most basic thing about the subject. Okay, most basic subject matter. Actually, the subject matter of economics is concerned with three basic questions. Nothing but three basic questions. And what are these three basic questions? These three basic questions are as follows. The first is the question related to this, that is, what is to be produced? What is to be produced? Then, who is going to produce that? Who will produce it? And thirdly, who gets to consume it, or who will consume it? Who will consume? Okay. Now, these are the three basic questions of economics that economics as a discipline seeks to answer. What is to be produced? Who will produce? And who is going to consume that? Okay. Understand, it is not only about the answers to these questions, it is also about the body that is answering this question. Understand that the body which answers this question will decide not only about the answers but also about the economic system as a whole. Okay, so it may happen, or the answer to this question can come from various quarters, or you can say the bodies which are going to determine the answers of this question. We can have a range of that, or they can lie in a range. We can draw it like this kind of linear spectrum, where on one hand or one extreme of the spectrum lies the government or the state, and on the other extreme of the spectrum lies the free market. So, what did I say here? That the subject matter of economics is actually dealing with three basic questions, that is, what is to be produced, who is going to produce that, and who will consume that. Okay, if these three basic questions are being answered by government or the state, okay, government is one organ of the state, then all the three questions are going to be answered by the government and the state, and that economic system will be a system of command economy. Okay, command economy, or you can say also can be synonymously called socialist economy, although there is a difference, but for our understanding we can use these terms synonymously. Okay, on the other hand, if those three basic questions, that is, what is to be produced, how much is to be produced, and who is going to consume that, if all those basic questions are going to be answered by private individuals, then that will happen in a freely functioning market, and that system is called free market economy, uh, also called capitalist economy. Okay, capitalist economy. Although there are nuances of differences between these terms here, but we are using synonymously because um, this connote the same type of economic system. Okay, and I said that these are the two extremes of the linear spectrum, the range that we have. Okay, now countries do not fall in the extreme of this spectrum. You will find countries lying in between these two extremes. Now, it may happen that some countries are nearer to this end of the spectrum and the other countries are nearer to this end of the spectrum. Understand what we are trying to understand here, that the subject matter of economics deals with three basic questions, and the body that determines the answer of this basic question also determines the type of economic system. Okay, also determines the type of economic system. So who is going to produce, what is going to be produced, and who gets to consume? If all this is decided by the state, that is called socialist economy, command economy. And if all this is decided by private individuals interacting with each other as entrepreneurs in a freely functioning market, entrepreneurs and customers in a freely functioning market, then that is called capitalist economy. Now, countries like USA, Western European countries, North American countries find themselves nearer to this end of the spectrum. Okay, they are more and more capitalist economies. Okay, sorry, this end of this spectrum. So, USA, Canada, Western European countries like France, Germany, UK, all these countries are nearer to this end of the spectrum. While countries like Russia, Venezuela, Cuba are nearer to this end of the spectrum. Okay, because no country in the world is completely socialist or completely commanded by state, and no country is based on a completely free market system. Okay, so there is a difference in terms of the degree, and these are the two extremes. Now, what about India? If can I place India? We can come to know about the economic system prevailing in India by saying that which body determines uh, these three basic questions, that is, what is to be produced, how much is to be produced, and who gets to consume that. These three basic questions, if it is being answered by a state in India, then that will make Indian economy a command economy. See, right after 1991, when we went for LPG reforms, we are becoming more and more a free market oriented economy. So we are moving closer to this end of the spectrum, especially after the year 1991 when we adopted LPG reforms. Okay, so maybe behind USA or UK or Germany, France, but it's still closer to this end of the spectrum rather than this end of the spectrum, especially after 1991. Okay, understand that these three questions, which are deciding the subject matter, the scope of economics, are actually about resource allocation. Resource allocation. So, what is to be produced, how much is to be produced, who gets to consume that, all that is being decided by different bodies, and this is actually called resource allocation. So, economics in that sense is also about resource allocation. Okay, resource allocation. So, resource allocation involves ownership, uses, and transaction. Okay, ownership, uses, and transaction. So, these questions are actually dealing with these three facets, that is, ownership of resources, uses of resources, and transacts of resources. Okay, so this is actually the most basic thing about economics as a discipline. But still, I said that economics, the term you do not find in UPSC syllabus. So the term that has been used is economic development. Okay. And when I say that we are going to study mainly about Indian economy, then also I'm not using the word Indian economics. So the next thing that we should know, which again is very basic, is this, that what is the difference between economics and economy? Two terms. Okay, economics and economy. What is economics? You just came to know that it is a study of production, distribution, consumption of goods and services, a science actually which uh, studies the production, distribution, goods and services, science of decision making, more precisely. We are going to answer the question whether it is a pure science or not. Okay, economics and economy. So you can say that economics is actually a discipline, an academic discipline, academic discipline, which is actually concerned with theorization, model building, and all. Okay, so a great deal of theorization, model building is involved in economics as a discipline. Theorization which seeks to explain some activity. Then, what is economy? Economy is actually related to the activities of economic actors, economic agents, and here it is human beings. Okay, human beings. So how they go on utilizing the resources, how they go on about the ownership of resources, how they transact the resources. Okay, all that is called economic activities of economic agents. The economic activities of economic agents, here economic agents are actually human beings. So economic activity of human beings, that is actually the uh, what economy as a discipline or as a subject deals with. Okay, so it is more of model building and theorization, while it is more of dealing with activities of human agents. Okay, you can say that economy is nothing but the economics at play. Economics at play means the practical application of economics. So you will see these things more in paper, that is theorization, model building, and all. And here, the practical application of those things will be witnessed. So, economy can simply be called economics, economics at play, or you can say practical application of economics in a particular region or geography. Okay, in a particular region, geography, or country. So the same principle of economics, same theories, same models that we study here may manifest itself or may manifest themselves in various ways in different regions and geographies. And that is why you have the terms Indian economy or European economy or USA's American economy. You do not have the terms like USA's economics or Indian economics or European economics. No. So it is the economy that changes with change in region or geography and not the economics. Okay, not the economics. So in most simple terms, what is economy? It is economics at play, or the practical application of economics, which is actually dealing with the economic activities of economic agents, that is human beings here. Okay, so this again is again the most basic thing about the subject that we are going to deal with. Okay, now lastly, another basic thing that we are going to cover here is this, that economics as a discipline is a discipline of science or social science. Understand that what is science? What is science? Any any discipline which is pure science, how we come to know about it being a science or not? A science discipline or discipline which is studied under science actually deals with causal relationship. Causal relationship. Okay, causal relationship, that is cause and effect relationship. Okay, so for example, physics, chemistry, those disciplines actually deal with cause and effect relationship. And there is a certainty factor involved there, because if the cause remains the same, effect is not going to be different. So if there is exactly same cause, then that will have the same effect. And that means that the things are certain there. So certainty as an element is a feature of science disciplines. Economics as a discipline or as an academic discipline is actually scientifically studying the activity of humans or economic activity of economic agents, that is humans here. Although it is science in the sense that involves systematic study, but it is not a pure science because it involves the study of human agents, and that is why a great deal of human behavior is involved there. And because of the involvement of human behavior, things are not as predictable, as certain as they are in the discipline of science. Okay, so economics in that sense is a discipline of social science, is a discipline of social science, although it is very systematic in studying the human behavior, but still it is based on the study of human behavior, and that is why a great deal of unpredictability is involved there. Okay, human behavior cannot be predicted all the time, And that is actually one of the feature of social science discipline, and that makes economics a social science discipline. Understand? Understand? Uh, Time pass, sir. In ongoing classes, can we personally meet you regarding our doubts? Yes, you can meet us. You can meet every faculty here, and you all your doubts will be addressed. Okay. Now coming to this thing, that what is the direct implication of economics being a discipline of social science? The direct implication. Understand, when we have disciplines under science, the terms and the definitions of pure science are actually certain. They are definite. So, for example, in chemistry, you study the definition of, say, element, you study the definition of compound. Now, there are no exceptions to these things. Okay, the definition of acid, the definition of base, they do not change, and there are no exceptions there. Okay, so element can never be a compound, a compound cannot be an element on certain occasions. But when it comes to social science, then the terms are defined in a manner where we cannot impose very strict definitions on them. So the definitions cannot be as strict as they are in the disciplines of science. For example, if I say that, if I use the term open economy, okay, open economy, or if I use the term free trade agreement. So open economy means an economy which is not an hermit economy, which is freely interacting with the world. Okay, in that sense, India is an open economy. What is the meaning of free trade agreement? If two countries sign free trade agreement, that would mean that free trade agreement, there will be, it is supposed that there will be zero negative list. Negative list means there will be no items which are not going to be traded between these two countries which have signed a free trade agreement. But in every free trade agreement, you will find a certain commodities listed as negative items. Okay, in every free trade agreement. Now, India is open economy. Many economies in the world are actually open economies, but still they impose restrictions on commodities, export and import. Okay, so that restrictions that impose on certain goods and services doesn't make them a closed economy. Okay, so although there is a definition of open economy, but we cannot be completely strict with the definition. That is what we mean to say here. We cannot be completely strict with the definition. Okay, so that is what we have come to know, that what is economics, how it becomes the study of production, distribution, consumption of goods and services. Then what is the subject matter of economics, how economics as a discipline seeks to answer those three basic questions, and how the body that is going to answer or determine three basic questions also determines the economic system, the type of economic system. Then we understood that what is economics. It is a discipline of science or it is a discipline of social science. Finally, we concluded that yes, economics is a discipline of social science, and then we saw the direct implication of that thing, that why, what is actually the implication of economics being a discipline of social science. Okay, now if you understand the difference between economics and economy, then you will be able to appreciate the difference here, that economics as a term has not been used in your syllabus. So what we have is economy, mainly Indian economy, and to be more precise, they are emphasizing, the UPSC is emphasizing more on economic development. Economic development. Okay. But as I said in the starting, that in order to make a fair assessment of economic development, you need to have basic idea about economics, or the basic idea about the most basic principles of economics. Okay, so as the prelims syllabus contains economic and social development, so sustainable development. So for example, economic and social development, generally these things will involve what? They will involve definitely the knowledge of GDP, that GDP, GNP, that means that is something that we study under national income. Okay. Now, economic and social development, sustainable development, poverty, inclusion, all that will require the knowledge of basic features of Indian economy. We will also require the knowledge of national income, how it is calculated. Then only we can come to know about different aggregates, for example, GDP, GNP, NNP, all that. And then we will be able to make an assessment whether there has been economic development or not. Because what is economic development? Economic development is nothing but that kind of economic growth which entails increase in standard of living also. So that is called economic development. So economic development in that sense is economic growth plus increase in well-being. Sustainable development ensures that development, or that kind of development, which along with fulfilling the needs of the present generation also takes care of the needs of future generations. So development takes place which does not compromise with the needs and the requirements of future generations. So that will necessitate a kind of developmental model which takes care of the carrying capacity of nature, that if we employ certain machineries for production and they are using natural resources, then they should be using those natural resources to the extent that nature could replenish itself. Okay, so that will ensure sustainable development. Then poverty is defined in various ways, so we are going to see that what is the basic definition of poverty. Means it may refers to absolute poverty, that means a situation where people are deprived from the most basic necessities of life. Okay, when people are not able to fulfill even the most basic requirements. Then there is another term, for example, relative poverty, which actually deals more with differences in level of income or expenditure labor among different sections of society. Here, we will be concerned about knowing that what are the causes of poverty, what have been the government measures to uh, eradicate poverty, and what can be the way forward. So, those are the issues which are going to be dealt with in these chapters. But again, understand that these are the very broad topics. These have been explicitly mentioned in the syllabus. Okay, explicitly mentioned in the syllabus. But as I told you, the previous year questions analysis will makes it clear, or it makes it clear that we need to have the basic understanding of economics as a subject. Okay, so we need to have the basic understanding of socioeconomic features of India. Then we need to have basic understanding of national income. We need to go for the study of monetary policy, fiscal policy. We need to study the banking, because all those channels are actually involved. Say for example, inclusion. Okay, so if we talk about inclusion, it may be financial inclusion, it may be about bringing the all the section of society into the mainstream developmental process. Okay, so various institutions are required here. So banking actually becomes very important. So we need to study about the banking and non-banking financial companies. We need to study about the development finance institutions. We also need to know, we need to have proper understanding about monetary and fiscal policy, money supply. Okay, we need to make an assessment about the inflation in the country. So we need to have a good study about the inflation, what is its impact over population. We also need to have a proper study about financial market, that involves capital market and money market, and that also involves the study of stock markets, share market. After that, we need to have a good understanding about the process that is adopted in making budget and passing the budget. Okay, all of these are not mentioned in the syllabus explicitly, but they are to be covered. Okay, similarly, when it comes to mains syllabus, again, in mains, they have provided some topics explicitly, but all the topics that we are required to study here, they are not actually explicitly mentioned. Okay, so for example, here, Indian economy issues related to planning, mobilization of resources, growth, development, employment. Understand, it is completely about Indian economy or economic system in India. Economic system in India. Okay, so as I said in the starting, that economics, or the subject matter of economics, deals with three basic questions. And that also determines the type of economic system. So if you talk about Indian economy, earlier it adopted a mixed economic system, and mixed economic system is actually a system which uh, involves both private sector as well as public sector. Okay, while in a capitalist economy, what happens? There is a dominance of private sector, while in socialist economies there is a dominance of public sector. In mixed economic system, the system that we adopted, there was a dominance or simultaneous existence of both public as well as private sector. Okay, so economic system in India has undergone a change, and that is reflected in the policies of the government and also in changing the shape, the very structure of certain organizations. So, for example, planning is actually a process which is adopted mainly in socialist countries. So what happens that in capitalist countries, resource allocation takes place through market. A freely functioning market is there which intercepts different demand and supply messages and um, works on that principle of demand and supply. So planning is not necessary there. Planning becomes a necessity where state control resources, whereas there are no free markets or free enterprises. So planning, economic planning is actually a method of resource allocation in socialist economies. Earlier, we adopted a mixed economic system which, with a heavy hand of the state, and that is why planning was very essential. So the system of resource allocation that we adopted after independence was having a tilt, or it was kind of having a similarity with the socialist system, and that is why we also had an institution entrusted with the task of planning, and that was called Planning Commission. Okay, Planning Commission, which used to come with 5-year plans. So last 5-year plan was 12th 5-year plan, which is spanned from the year 2012 to 2017. But before this 12th 5-year plan uh, came to end in the year 2014, the whole institution was restructured, and new institution came into being, that is Niti Aayog, which replaced the Planning Commission. Okay, so when Niti Aayog as an institution replaced Planning Commission, that doesn't mean that we have done away with the process of planning. Earlier, Planning Commission used to make plans, and that plans were actually passed by National Development Council. And National Development Council actually included states. So through National Development Council, it was tried, it was attempted that states could also be taken on board, but that used to happen only when the planning process involved completion of the planning process, or completion of the plans. That means when plans were being passed, only then National Development Council as a body was consulted. But what is being done differently through Niti Aayog is that the planning process has become bottom up instead of top down. So it is not only during the passage or during the passing of the plans that the states and other bodies are involved. They are part of planning process. States and even uh, local governments are actually part of the formulation of plans right from the beginning. And that is why through Niti Aayog it is being tried that the whole process of planning becomes or adopts bottom up approach instead of top down approach. Okay, so planning as one kind of resource allocation, one form of resource allocation, one style of resource allocation will always be there if government involves itself significantly or considerably in resource allocation. Okay, so mobilization of resources, growth, development, and employment. Okay, so growth and development, that is something that was there in prelims syllabus also. So what is growth? How you define growth? You define growth simply by increase in production. So if you have to define growth, you can simply call it increase in production. Okay, so whether growth has taken place or not, we can come to know by comparing the GDP in different years, or GNP, or per capita income, because growth in that sense is a very quantitative concept. Okay, so if growth has taken place or not, we can come to know it only by analyzing certain criteria, for example, per capita income, GDP, or GNP. But what about development? It is a broader concept. It is going to involve a standard of living, an increase in the welfare of the people also. Okay, but what is required for growth? How we can ensure that there is a continuous increase in production? So that will require many things. That will require investment. Investment will require savings. So great deal of capital formation is required, which will ensure better infrastructure. That will ensure better productivity, higher productivity. So that will ensure growth. But whether that process of growth is resulting in any kind of increase in the standard of living among different sections of society or not, that is something we try to assess through assessment of development. Okay, similarly, employment. Again, very important topic, because this determines not only growth but also development, because employment is going to be directly concerned with the situation of poverty, because unemployment becomes most important reason behind poverty in India. Okay, so these are topics which are going to involve the knowledge of various topics which we study under economics. Okay, so although they are not explicitly mentioned, but they have been made part of the syllabus in implicit manner. Okay, and this course that we are going to have here is going to be dealing with all those topics which are not explicitly mentioned in the syllabus but are implied in it. Similarly, inclusive growth and issues arising out of it. One of the most favorite topic of UPSC is inclusive growth. And here we need to understand that it is a still broader concept than growth or development. So this year also, they asked the question on inclusive growth. So what is inclusive growth? Almost every year they have been asking the question on this topic. I said growth is what? Growth is increase in production. Okay. Then what is development? That process of economic growth which is also bringing kind of welfare, or which is increasing the standard of living of the people, that is called economic development. Or inclusive growth is a broader concept, broader than economic development. Okay, because if you go with this definition, in most simple terms, it can be said that it is a growth of all sections of society, both rich and poor. But a more comprehensive understanding of inclusive growth will require that a system could emerge, in economic system could emerge, where everyone takes part or everyone participates in the organization of growth. Participates in the organization of growth, and every section of society gets benefited equally from it. Equally from it. So for example, if GDP is increasing, we can say that economic growth is taking place. If per capita income is increasing, if there is increase in real GDP, that means that can happen only when there is increase in production, and that is what we know as growth. And if economic growth is resulting into increased standard of living, we can say that economic development has taken place. But economic development can take place even when people remain the passive beneficiaries. For example, economic growth happens, then the rich of the society are able to appropriate more benefits in their favor, and now they are going to be taxed. That tax amount is going to be used by the government for welfare schemes targeting the poor, and that will actually increase their standard of living also. So the welfare schemes, through welfare schemes where the target beneficiaries became the passive beneficiaries of the welfare schemes, we can ensure economic development. But inclusive growth will require the participation of all sections of society in the organization of growth, in the very process of growth. So this will require what? Inclusive growth will require that every section of society becomes capable of contributing in the production process. Okay, now it becomes capable of contributing in the production process, that means organization of growth, and also is benefiting from it. Okay, so it is a much broader concept than economic development. Inclusive growth cannot be called or it cannot be referred to a process where section of society remains a passive beneficiaries of welfare schemes. No, it requires a system whereby every section of society could become capable of participating or contributing in the process of production. So that is one very important topic that we need to study. So what are the actually issues related to it? Understand that when we try to have inclusive growth, that means we will need to have a system which could make people capable. That means which could provide them better education, better educational skills, which could ensure their proper health. Only then they will become capable of participating in the organization of growth. That means what it means when we say that people should become capable. See, when they become employable, we can say that they are able to participate in the production process. So inclusive growth will require that we could make our population employable, our youth employable, so that they could participate in the organization of growth. At the same time, it will also require that we could generate employment avenues where those employable people could be getting employment opportunities. So they could be employed, and they could be employed only when they will be employed only when they could become employable. So these are the issues which are related to inclusive growth. That is something that we are going to deal with. Again, very explicitly mentioned topic is the government budgeting. Okay, so what is budget? Annual financial statement that has been made compulsory, kind of compulsory by your constitution. It is actually compulsory and is a major policy decision. So much so that if government is not able to pass the budget, then Prime Minister along with Council of Ministers needs to resign. So very important thing. And it is not actually related to figures or receipts and expenditure alone. Government, when it introduces a budget, it is actually introducing its policies. So it is more of a policy document which is going to tell you about how government is going to approach the problems, economic problems of the country, what the government is offering, what way it is offering, with uh, the challenges that we are facing here in our economy, how government is going to approach them, how government is going to deal with them. That is something which is clear in the budget, and that is why it is being awaited every time by every section in the country. So that is very important topic. And this year also UPSC, in the last mains that we had, UPSC asked a direct question on the budget. We are going to see that. Then these things are actually related to agriculture, and in a way they also get related to environment. Okay, so different sectors of the economy have their different importance. For example, agriculture and allied activities, then industry, then services. But agriculture as a sector is very important for India. Why? Because if you analyze the contribution of agriculture in terms of employment, so it's still 44, around 44%. If we talk about the pre-pandemic year 2019, so 44 to 45% of labor force is still involved in agriculture. Okay, so we are kind of agriculture dominant economy when it comes to its contribution in employment. We are a service sector dominant economy when it comes to contribution in GDP. So 44% of labor force involved in agriculture, contributing just around 16% to GDP. Contributing around just 16% to GDP. So 44% people involved in agriculture may not be a problem in itself. The problem is that this 44% of the labor force is contributing just to 16% of GDP. So this is the problem that we have with agriculture in India. Okay, so what we need to do here? First, 44% of the labor force is involved with very low level of productivity. That means there is a very high level of disguised unemployment. Okay, that means the marginal productivity of labor is zero here. Means more than the required optimum requirement of labor may be a limit, but here people who are involved there, labor force which is involved there, is more than the optimum requirement. Okay, so that is a case of disguised unemployment that we need to take care of. Now, productivity becomes an issue, and the other thing which also becomes an issue is how could we ensure their forward transition of this labor force. A great chunk of this labor force which remains unskilled or not semi-skilled, how we could help them to make a forward transitions towards higher sectors of the economy, for example, industries or services. Okay, so that they could get the jobs in construction sector, manufacturing sector and all. So that is a challenge. And second, the challenge is how to increase the contribution of agriculture in GDP. That is how to ensure better productivity and all. Understand, a very important problem related to agriculture is this, that the population is continuously rising. Okay, so the basic fact is that population is continuously rising. At the same time, there is a continuous stress on agricultural land. So with increase in urbanization, industrialization, with increase in the uses of land is such, is changing or taking a shape whereby more and more agricultural land is being diverted for other purposes. Okay, so population is continuously increasing. That means there will be greater demand for food, and agricultural land is continuously decreasing. Okay, so what becomes necessary here? This is the challenge. Then what becomes necessary, and where the solution lies? The solution lies solely in increasing the productivity. Productivity. So if we could not increase, we could not ensure the higher productivity in agriculture, then we face a situation of food crisis. Okay, a food crisis, because there is a continuous increase in population that will continuously increase the demand for food. Okay, and there is a continuous decrease in agricultural land. So what is the solution? Increasing the productivity in agricultural land. That can only ensure food security. Productivity becomes an issue in India because of various factors. So the problem starts right from the ownership of the land. There is fragmentation of land holding in India, and more than 85% of the farmers in the country are small and marginal farmers. That is, they are holding less than 1 hectare of land. So uh, a great deal of agriculture happening in India is a kind of subsistence agriculture. That is, whatever they are producing, they are consuming it themselves. They are producing it for their own consumption. Okay, so a major production is not actually reaching to the market. So that is a problem. Now, if that is not happening, then what is the solution? We can go for consolidation of land holding, or we can go for increasing the productivity in those farmlands. But productivity will require mechanization of agricultural process. Mechanization will require farmers to have most modern tools of agriculture, but that will require investment. That is not happening because they are not able to have surplus production. Now, if they do not have the surplus production, they cannot make money, and if they cannot make money, they cannot mechanize their process. Secondly, because of this land holdings, small land holdings, they cannot approach to the banks also, because they do not have much collateral with them, and bank will be less willing to give them loans. So they don't have much access to the credit also. And problem also arises because occasionally when they have surplus, there is price crash of agricultural commodities, because still we lack a physical national agriculture market, although there is ENAM which has come into existence, but still there are problems with agriculture market. Okay, so if farmer produces or go for, if agriculture, if in any particular year there is surplus production in agriculture, farmer is not awarded, or it is not, farmer is not rewarded for producing extra. Farmer actually suffers because of surplus production, because of the structure of agriculture market. So there are issues in agriculture which are related to land holding, which are related to marketing, which are related to the process, and which are actually also related to various things, various kind of inputs which are required for agriculture. Okay, so that is something that we are trying to deal with, and here that section is something that we are going to study. So different types of irrigation and irrigation system, because um, estimates are actually available where it is suggested that there can be a possibility of water crisis in near future in India, and that is why irrigation becomes important. Then storage, transportation, marketing, as I said, that this becomes very necessary, because in order to have fair remuneration of the produce that farmers are producing, this storage, transportation, marketing becomes very essential. Then issues related to constraints related to these things. Then e-technology in the aid of farmers. Understand that I said that with agriculture related is the issue of environment. What is happening that the farmers here in India are driven to generate surplus, and so that they could make certain amount of money which they could utilize for further investment in agriculture and could uplift their economic status. And in that pursuit, they are using more and more organic, more and more inorganic, and some chemical fertilizers that actually disturbs the soil profile, and it actually is coming in the way of ensuring a sustainable agricultural practice. Okay, so what is being suggested here is this, that if they are provided with better information, then they can go for better decision making. E-technology would ensure that farmers have real-time information access. They could employ technology for ensuring better production, higher production. They could involve technology so that they could mechanize the process of agriculture, and which could also help them to detect certain pests and other things which actually disturb their agricultural activities. So all that is there. Through various e-technology process, it is being ensured that farmers could be benefited. Okay, so that is something we are going to study. Nowadays, it is not only about e-technology, even artificial intelligence is also being involved, is being included here. Uh, and various, for example, crop techs. So you might have studied about various e-technology initiatives. But now artificial intelligence is also being involved here. Croptex is one initiative, or a kind of company doing very good in USA, also having reach in Africa, which is involving artificial intelligence technology, that is kind of human simulation, while analyzing the data and also coming out with solutions in detecting certain diseases. Okay, so citrus greening is one disease which is present in Asian countries. It is present in Asia also, and does not have any cure. It does not have any medicine as a remedy. So Croptex as a company is involving artificial intelligence to detect that citrus greening early stages, so that some remedial actions could be taken. So e-technology nowadays does not involve only traditional technologies. It has also started involving artificial intelligence. We are going to see that also. Okay, lastly, it is issues related to direct and indirect farm subsidies, minimum support price, public distribution system, then issues of buffer stocks and food security, technology missions, economics of animal rearing. So you understand, again, this is related to post-production issues. For example, there are pre-production issues, that is when farmer faces various problems with regard to uh, the inputs in agriculture. After that, it faces problem that when he or she has a good amount of produce, then marketing becomes an issue. Okay, so in order to ensure a kind of security, to provide security, minimum support price is given or offered to the farmer. So what are issues related to it? Now, uh, through public distribution system, it has been ensured that a kind of inclusive development could take place in India. So that is actually the main objective of public distribution system. That has been the main objective of public distribution system. But now, how direct benefit transfer is considered a better solution instead of providing food or commodity to the individuals. Then issues of buffer stocks and food security. What are the problems there? How this is related to the issue of minimum support price? Which are the agencies involved here? Then the technology missions, various technology missions are involved for ensuring various kinds of facilities to the farmers and to the agriculture sector at large. What are those technology missions? Then economics of animal rearing, because the related issue with agriculture is allied activities that involves animal rearing, because this sector provides a kind of security to the farmers, because during the lean seasons in agriculture, it is the animal rearing which provides them the means of livelihood. Also, the output from this particular sector can be used as input in agriculture. And similarly, a kind of system can emerge where the output of agriculture sector, the waste of agriculture sector, can be used as input in animal rearing sector. So uh, this also becomes necessary for the security of the farmers community. Okay, so various schemes have been there by the government to ensure the safety and security of the farmers. Okay, so let us see the next, food processing sector. That is also very important, related with agriculture, but here we are talking about kind of industrialization of agriculture sector, or connecting the agriculture sector with industry. Okay, because one important reason why farmers in India are not getting fair remuneration when it comes to their produce is that a lot of wastage take place. Okay, lot of wastage of perishable items, perishable agricultural produce. So that is because uh, no proper storage and transportation is available. And sometimes food processing industries are also not able to in-source those products, those produce. So what is being tried here, that we could uh, kind of do uh, if we could ensure the development of this particular sector, which is going to reduce the wastage and will also ensure the proper remuneration to the agricultural produce to the farmers community. So this has a lot of potential in India, and through this we can ensure that we could directly connect the agriculture to the industry, we could directly connect the farmers to the farmers community to the uh, industrialization process, which is going to further improve the remuneration level of farmers community, is going to provide them economic security, is going to provide proper prices to the agricultural produce. And India has huge potential in processing. So if we could encourage this sector, there is a huge chance that we can encourage export also, export of processed food and processed commodities. So India is doing very good when it comes to the production of vegetables, then fruits and all. If we could use or ensure their proper processing through food processing industries, that is going to benefit the whole sector. So this particular topic is related to that. So what are the problems in food processing? What are the methods that government has adopted? So there's something called mega food parks and all. So how those things are related to food processing? What can be done to further ensure better food processing industries in India? And how we can connect the farmers community. Okay, so this is actually a platform where a possibility exists that a great deal of employment which is there in agriculture sector in undisguised employment form, uh, that kind of labor force can make a forward transition towards this sector at least, because they can be readily provided with the skills which are required in food processing, and they can make a forward transition. So that will ensure economic development also. Okay, because now when a great number of labor force which is involved in agriculture in undisguised unemployment form, if they are involved in food processing sector, they will be making better, they will be offered better wages, and will involve themselves in the organization of growth in a more productive manner. So that will benefit the economy as a whole. Then land reforms in India, an explicitly mentioned topic which has been very important in India, for because it is related to evolution of jamidari, then tenancy rights, then land ceiling, then cooperatives, many things. Okay, so in that sense, it actually is very crucial. Um, Further, it got related to digitization of land record also. So land reforms in India has been very important. Actually, they have not been carried out um, in all parts of India in the best manner possible, but wherever they have been carried out, they have actually resulted into a better economic situation for a large section of society. So, for example, in West Bengal, in Kerala, they have been carried out in a good manner, and they have actually brought good results. So, land reforms in India, what have been the case, how they have contributed in the upliftment of different sections of society in social and political sphere. So this year also UPSC asks direct question on land reforms. So that is something that we are going to analyze here. Then effects of liberalization on economy. Now, liberalization is something that we adopted in the year 1991. Okay. So through liberalization, 1991, actually the kind of liberalization process that India adopted in the year 1991 under this LPG reforms, uh, you might be knowing that that was because of a kind of economic expediency, you can say, that because there was a crisis, a balance of payment crisis precisely, that necessitated India to go to IMF to take loans, and IMF imposed structural adjustment programs over India, and only then it could provide loans. So in that structural adjustment programs, it was required on part of India to go to liberalize its economy, to privatize various sectors, and to also integrate its economy more and more with the global economy. So that was something which we started doing right after 1991, and this required India to change its policy on various fronts. Okay, so industrial policy also got changed. Though, what are the changes in industrial policy? How industrial policy, which has been adopted in post-liberalization era, is actually dealing more with uh, maintenance rather than regulation, and how we are going to ensure that India industrializes fully before it becomes completely a service sector economy, a service sector dominant economy. Understand that a unique facet of Indian economic growth is this, that we have been an agriculture dominant economy, both in terms of employment, in terms of the contribution in employment, and also in terms of the contribution in GDP. So in the year 1970, in the year 1950, 75% of the labor force was involved in agriculture. It contributed around 50% or more than 50% to the GDP. But here in 2019, if I take the year 2019, because it is a pre-pandemic year, uh, after that there was disruption, you know that. So in 2019, I told you that 44 to 45% of labor force is involved in agriculture and contributes only 16% to GDP. And we have become a service sector dominant economy when it comes to contribution in GDP. So service sector, which employs about a quarter of labor force, but contributes more than 50% to India's GDP. So we have become service sector dominant economy without becoming fully industrialized. Okay, so that is a unique case that we have. So we are the only country which have become service sector dominant economy in terms of contribution to GDP without getting fully industrialized. So we are trying to have a U-turn. We are again coming back to industrialize ourselves fully. So what have been the major problems in industrialization? See, we have done very good when it comes to service sector, because service sector employs those section of labor force which is highly skilled, English speaking. So for example, IT sector, software sector, then BPO, KPO sectors. These sectors involve that section of youth which is highly skilled, which is English speaking. But in order to industrialize ourselves, what is needed? We need to have a labor force which is skilled in uh, industrial and manufacturing activities, and that is something which has been missing in India. So although service sector contributes good when it comes to GDP, it is not able to absorb large chunk of labor force, and large chunk of labor force cannot be involved in agriculture also, because it is already involved there more than the optimum requirement. So what is the way out? The way out is ensuring proper industrialization in the country. Okay, so especially in manufacturing sector, a great deal of scope, great scope exists, which can absorb large chunk of labor force. But within manufacturing sector, what has happened that we have country or the policies in India have been promoting those manufacturing sector which are actually capital incentive and will require that kind of labor force which is highly skilled. But what was required in our case was ensuring the promotion of that kind of manufacturing which employs semi-skilled labor force or unskilled labor force. For example, textile, leather, footwear and all. But that has been ignored. So through proper industrial policy, it, it is suggested that we need to make sure that we could promote those sectors of economy which are more and more labor intensive and which require low skilled or semi skilled labor force, because that is how our labor force, our labor market is, and that is how we can ensure uh, job opportunities, employment generation, and more people could get employment in higher sectors of the economy. So that is being tried. Okay, so that is actually the problem here. We have a large chunk of labor force which remains unskilled or at max semi skilled, And at the same time, we have been promoting those sectors of manufacturing, those sectors of the economy which require highly skilled labor force. Okay, I'm talking about industry here, and within industry, I'm talking precisely about manufacturing. So, two front war is needed here. The first is skilling the labor force in large number, and second is promoting those sectors of manufacturing within industry which do not require very high skill, where large chunk of labor force which is unskilled or at max semi skilled could also be employed. So this is how we can improve the economic situation in the country. Okay, because of unskilled labor force or labor force which is not skilled, industrial units or the manufacturing units which were located in China, because of the increase in wages, it was expected that they are going to get attracted towards India again because of cheap labor force. But they started moving towards Southeast Asian countries or African countries. We were waiting that now, because of the increase in wages in China, they will come to India. But they made their way to Southeast Asian countries or African countries only because we could not ensure proper skilling of labor force. Okay, so that has been the problem. That is why we need to bring about changes in that area. Okay, lastly, infrastructure, the very oil, the driving, the motor of economy, which actually makes your economy attractive, attractive for investment. And it is only through investment that we can ensure higher productivity. Okay, so it is the infrastructure which makes the economy attractive for investment, and investment again is required for infrastructure. So infrastructure, when we talk about infrastructure, we talk about transportation, logistics and all. And transportation can be of various can be through various media, so ports, roads, airports, railways. It can also include waterways. So all that is required for better efficiency, better productivity. Okay, then energy is also required. So there are various sources of energy, renewable sources of energy, non-renewable sources of energy, conventional, non-conventional sources of energy. Okay, uh, it is suggested that India is actually an energy starved nation. Energy starved nation. That the amount of energy that is required in India for maximum for reaching to our um, fullest potential, that we are not able to manage. At the same time, there is a challenge that we have to make transition from being a coal-oriented energy country to other sources of energy which are more um, renewable, because we have certain commitments. For example, given we have given our INDCs, intended nationally determined contributions, under Paris Climate Deal. So we have to make sure of that also. Okay, but the challenge is there because when it comes to non-renewables resources, the cost of generating electricity or ensuring energy is very high here in comparison to the traditional sources of energy. So that becomes a challenge. So at the same time, we also need to ensure something called energy justice. Energy justice. That means we need to make sure that every section of society have access to energy. For example, when we talk in terms of energy, generally we forget small and marginal farmers. Okay, because they also need energy for proper irrigation, uh, for, uh, for for their own productivity in their farmlands. Maybe those farmlands are of a small scale, but still they require energy. So what can be done? What can be done? For example, small hydropower plants can be there. Then grid connectivity has been improved to provide them better access to electricity and all. So when we talk energy, we are not talking only about manufacturing or industrial sector. We are also talking about all the sectors. Okay. So along with energy, there is a concept of energy justice that also needs to be taken care of. UPSC actually focuses on that aspect also. Okay. Lastly, it is investment models. So I said that infrastructure investment is needed. Investment will ensure capital formation. That means more and more machineries, more and more factories are built. Okay, that ensures better productivity. And different kind of investment models are ensured for better infrastructure, higher level of investment, what are those investment models? What is the meaning of investment? Investment means spending money in generation of assets which could provide them periodic returns. So that is what we call as investment. So there have been different investment models. For example, private investment model has been adopted in India, which involves making the economy attractive for domestic investment as well as foreign investment. Then public investment is involved, uh, where government to a good extent is uh, investing in infrastructure. Sometimes it is also collaborating with foreign governments for infrastructure building in the country. Then there is a mixing of these two bodies, that is private sector and public sector, and something called public private partnership model is adopted, where there are various kinds of PPP models. So, for example, there is a build, operate, own model, then build, operate, transfer model, build, operate, own, transfer model. So there are various kinds of PPP models also. So that is also something that we are going to cover in investment models. Then after that, we are going to see that there have been cluster specific approach. For example, um, SEZs, special economic zones, then manufacturing zones have been established. Then area specific, for example, we have India has been building mega food parks and all. So that also is one form of investment model only. So we are going to study the investment models in this category, and there we are going to see that how different kind of investment models have different kind of impact, and which kind of model. Generally, it is actually the PPP model which has been employed um, in infrastructure building in the country. What are the problems in PPP model? Actually, UPSC has been asking question on PPP model also. So that is something that we are required to study. Again, only some topics have been explicitly mentioned in the syllabus, but there are various other topics which are missing completely, but they are implied in syllabus. For example, if they are asking the question on GDP, or if they are asking the question on economic growth, we are required to have a basic knowledge, a basic understanding of national income and different aggregates. If they are talking about inclusion, then we need to have a proper understanding of financial inclusion. For financial inclusion, we need to have proper assessment of all the schemes and programs of the government, for organized sector, for unorganized sector, which are related to pension, which are related to insurance, related to their ability to use banking products, for example, saving accounts, their access to saving accounts. Then channelization of credit, that is the availability of credit in different sectors. So for example, we need to study about PSL requirements, public sector lending requirements that have been imposed by the government. We also need to have a kind of knowledge of economic history of India also after independence. That is what has been the main objective of nationalization of banks that has been carried out in the year 1969. Then lead bank area scheme was adopted. What was its objective? What was the objective of service area approach? So all that is needed, because sometimes they provide a question, although uh, that may seem to be motivated by a topic which has been mentioned in the syllabus, but that will require not only the understanding of particular topic which they have given, but will require the basic understanding of Indian economy, the kind of economic policies that we have been adopting after independence. Okay, so that is something that we need to do. So our study of economics and in economy is going to involve the study of socio-economic features of Indian economy. It is going to involve the study of the basic microeconomic concepts. For example, what is the principle of demand? What is the principle of supply? What is its significance? What is the consumption? What is inflation? What are different kinds of inflation? How monetary policy is related with inflation? What RBI as a body can do to solve the problem of inflation? Then the study of institutions, for example, RBI, how RBI acts as a merchant banker to the government as well as acting as an apex monetary policy authority. Then we are also going to study about fiscal policy, taxation. We are also going to study about budget, financial market. Uh, a great deal of study about taxation is required here, because there have been the questions on GST also, although it is not mentioned in the syllabus. So taxation as a topic is not mentioned in the syllabus, but they are asking questions on GST. So various topics are required for proper understanding. Okay, so let us see. We cannot just go on sticking with the terms which are being used in the syllabus. Okay, so that is why uh, guidance becomes necessary here. Guidance by the a guide becomes necessary here, because UPSC has not mentioned very important, even very important chapters, even important topics of economics explicitly in the syllabus. So that becomes a kind of problem for, especially for newcomer. Okay, but no problem. uh, the kind of curriculum that has been designed for economics and in economy is such that includes everything, the proper analysis of previous year questions, and that is why we have made sure that all the relevant topics have been included. So what I have made sure is that I include all the sections, all the economic topics, the topics related to economics and in economy, which are not actually explicitly mentioned in the syllabus, but UPSC has been asking question on it. Okay, only because they are implied in the syllabus, only because those topics are employed. So for example, fiscal policy, monetary policy is not given in the syllabus separately, but it is implied in the syllabus. Okay, and they have been asking questions also. Microeconomics is not mentioned in the syllabus, but they are asking the concept of some microeconomic concepts in prelims examination. Okay, so that is required. Let us see some questions. Say for example, this question they have been asking. So these are questions that appeared in the last means examination conducted by UPSC. The first question is, that is, explain the difference between computing methodology of gross domestic product before the year 2015 and after the year 2015. Okay, explain the difference between computing methodology of India's domestic product, gross domestic product, before the year 2015 and after the year 2015. Now, one thing that should be kept in mind is this, that when it comes to the resources that you have to follow for the preparation of economics, uh, if uh, if you are part of this class, then everything which is necessary, which is required, is going to be provided in the class itself. Okay, the only thing extra that you have to do is this, that you have to follow current affairs. And for current affairs, the best source is National Daily. So there are very famous newspapers, so you can choose any one of them. I would recommend this paper, Indian Express. And here I'm talking about economy page. Economy page. For this section, economy page of Indian Express is really good. Okay. So attend the classes, then understand everything that is being explained in the classes, revise the class notes, because economics is a subject which will require sometimes very specialized knowledge about some topics, because depth is also required, depth or the conceptual clarity is also required, but at the same time, one must have a very good idea about the extent of the depth there. Okay, so for example, national income involves, as a chapter, national income involves a lot of technicalities. But only an experienced person knows that what is the extent that has to be covered when we are going to deal with the technicalities of this chapter. Okay, so that is why I said that the importance of guide is actually high in this particular subject. So even if you read NCERT, many times they are not clear when it comes to the clarity of the concept. Although I will suggest you to read NCERTs, okay, 9, 10th, 11th, 12th NCERT, about statistics of class 11th and microeconomics of class 11th, class 12th, that is not required. But 9th standard economy book, 10th standard economic book, 11th standard economic book, which is titled as economic development, and 12th standard macroeconomy, that is required. So these four books are actually important for you, but they are not the substitute of a good guide, because they are not actually dealing with the things in that clarity which is required, kind of clarity which is required. Okay, and sometimes if they are dealing, they are very clear, they compromise with the requirement. So they do not go to that depth which is required for clear understanding. Nevertheless, if you are preparing completely on your own, you should choose uh, NCRT books. Then you can select any book in the market, and then you can just follow this economy page of Indian Express. You can also follow editorial page and explain page, and you can also follow other newspapers. But this newspaper has been very beneficial for both prelims as well as mains examination for this particular section, that is economy section. Okay, because they, when they describe any particular news, they keep in mind that they are describing, they are telling that particular news to a lay person. So every time they make it a point that they explain the jargons, and from your point of view that is very necessary, that is very important. So they are going to employ a process and a style of telling you the important news in a manner where they keep in mind that they are writing it for the understanding of a lay person. So they are going to explain every time the difficult terms that are used in those news items and also articles. So Indian Express does a good job on that front. Okay, so that is for the resources that you have to follow. Mainly it is NCRT and current affairs. Now coming to this question, that is, explain the difference between computing methodology of India's gross domestic product before the year 2015 and after the year 2015. The, another important thing that we have to keep in mind is this, that apart from the conventional knowledge, the knowledge of static subjects that have been given explicitly in the syllabus or implied in the syllabus, they are going to be made part of class discussion, classroom program. You have to also have a tab on current affairs, that is very clear. But more than the current affairs, it is actually the contemporary issues that UPSC has been started focusing on. Okay, so UPSC is not confining itself with 1 year span of current affair activities. No, it is actually focusing on issues, and issues are of contemporary nature. So issues that have been there in contemporary times, that is become the top, has becoming more and more important for UPSC. So understand the question that there has been the revision in the methodology of GDP calculation, and that revision took place in the year 2015. Okay, so what happened when this government, the previous government that came into being in the year 2014, adopted a new methodology to calculate GDP. And the new methodology, when it was adopted, revised the economic growth for the year 2013-14. So old methodology suggested that the growth rate in India was 4.7% in the year 2013-14. But when new methodology was adopted, the growth rate in India came to be 6.9% in the year 2013-14. Okay, so that led to a lot of criticism, uh, controversy, you can say, that how when 2013-14 was a crisis year, investment was very low, savings rate was very low, because before that there was inflation, and in a situation of people, in a situation of inflation, people lose the capacity to save and also lose the willingness to save. That is something that will be made clear in the chapter of inflation. So when people cannot save, they are less willing to save and they are not able to save, saving rates will go down, the investment will go down. All that actually was happening in the year 2013-14, and new methodology suggested that the growth rate which was given by old methodology to be 4.7% was not actually 4.7%, it was 6.9%. Okay, so that figure actually created a controversy. And UPSC has been asking question on this. So UPSC, it was expected in the year 2016-17 that UPSC is going to ask question on change in the methodology. But UPSC did not ask it in 2016, 17 or 18. It asked in the year 2021 means. Okay. So that is why I say that focus on contemporary issues and do not confine yourself with a 1 year span of current affairs activities. No. Um, so that is very much clear. Not only from this question, UPSC has been doing so mm, since many years now. They are focusing on contemporary affairs instead of confining themselves with 1 year current activities. Okay, so let us address this question. That is the difference between computing methodology of India's gross domestic product before the year 2015 and after the year 2015. Okay, old methodology and new methodology. Pre 2015 and post 2015. See, first understand what is GDP. It is about the calculation of GDP. The first thing you should note down is this, that GDP as a topic is not mentioned in the syllabus. But I told you that national income is something that we have to study. It is implied in the syllabus. Okay, so GDP and other aggregates are studied in national income chapter in economics. What is GDP? It is actually the monetary value of all the final goods and services produced in a domestic territory of a country. Okay, so monetary value of all the final goods and services produced in the domestic territory of a country in a financial year. In a financial year. Okay. So money value, the monetary value of all the final goods and services. That means intermediate goods are not taken into account in calculation of GDP. Intermediate goods means, for example, raw materials. Why they are not accounted for? Because to avoid double calculation. Okay. In a domestic territory, GDP is actually related about the production in a domestic territory. And when it comes to domestic territory, the term is not synonymous with physical boundary. No, physical boundary. It is not synonymous with physical boundary. So India has this physical boundary, for example. So domestic territory of India will include definitely the physical boundary. It will also include exclusive economic zones. It will also include India has consulates and diplomatic office in other countries. It will also include India's fishing vessels in international land, international uh, seas or sea lanes of communications, in international bodies. So physical boundary is not synonymous with domestic territory here. So for example, if there are foreign consulates, foreign diplomatic office in India, they are going to be excluded from domestic territory. So for GDP, you need to have a proper understanding of domestic territory. That means physical boundary of a country, physical boundary of a country. It also includes exclusive economic zones, also includes countries, consulates, and diplomatic offices in other countries. Then it also includes its airspace, fishing vessels, and other things in other international land. Okay, in a financial year. So you know that from 1st April to 31st March there is financial year. So GDP is actually the monetary value of all the final goods and services produced in the domestic territory of a country in a financial year. That is GDP. Okay. So earlier when GDP was calculated in 2015, it was calculated by this particular base year, that is 2004-5. So the base year earlier in 2000 before 2015 was 2004-5. Okay, in post 2015 when new methodology was adopted, the base year was 2011-12. So the first change here was in the base year. The first change in the was in the base year. Now this became the first reason why there will be increase in absolute percentage. Why? Because when you shift the base year and when you go for calculation of GDP, it will be the monetary value. So for example, price of any particular product in the year 2010 2005 was 5 rupees. In 2006 it might be 6 rupees. In 2010 it might be 8 rupees. In 2011 it might be 10 rupees. And if you're going to go for the monetary value, you are going to multiply it with its price. Okay, so definitely there will be increase in price. So with change in base year, definitely there will be bounce in the figures of GDP. So that became actually one reason. If you talk about the changes alone, then 2004-5 became 2011-12. So the first change was that there was change in the base year. The second change was that earlier GDP was calculated in terms of GDP at factor cost, constant price. Okay, GDP at factor cost, constant price. So there are two things, factor cost and market price. Factor cost actually cost incurred on four factors or for other factors. For example, rent, wages, interest, and profit. Okay. See, there are four factors. For example, land, land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship. These are four factors of production. They are called factors of production because they are the only factor inputs which can do value addition, and only through value addition income can be generated, and only factor inputs can earn income, but only these factor inputs can generate income, and that is why they are called factors of production or factor inputs. Okay, while raw materials are also used in the process of production, but they are non-factor inputs because they cannot do value addition. Okay, so these are called factor inputs because only these inputs can do value addition, and only value addition can generate income in the economy. That is why we can say that only factors can generate income in the economy. So what are the income by these factors? By land there is rent, by labor there is wages, by capital there is interest, by entrepreneurship there is profit. So these factors of production generate different kinds of income because only factors can generate income. Because what is income? Income is nothing but value addition, and only factors can go for value addition. So GDP at factor cost. GDP at factor cost will include what? All these factors. Factor cost, that means rent, wages, interest, profit. In the new methodology, what was suggested that GDP should be calculated at market price, constant price. Or they not on factor cost but market price at constant price. See, these are technical terms that we study in detail in national income. But to answer this question, how easy this was if you understand the basic things. Okay, so firstly, what was needed? To have a proper knowledge of contemporary issues and not only the current affairs of last 1 year. And secondly, uh, the background, that why that particular contemporary issue actually became an issue. Okay, so the second difference is this, that earlier GDP was calculated at factor cost. Now the new methodology said that GDP is going to be calculated at market price. Understand that what is the difference between market price and factor cost? In earlier methodology, market price was what? Market price equals to factor cost, that is rent, wages, interest, profit, plus indirect taxes minus subsidy. Factor cost means the cost incurred when this particular thing, this particular marker or stylus was being produced. So factor cost in that sense is relevant from point of view of producer. Market price is relevant from point of view of consumer. So say for example the factor cost for this was 10 rupees. Now I was the producer, I paid 2 rupees of tax. So I'm going to charge this tax by passing the burden of tax to the consumer. So I will add 2 rupees here. So 10 plus 2, this became of 12 rupees. Then I was provided with 1 rupee of subsidy. So it is a producer who was given subsidy. So I will subtract 1 rupees from 12 rupees. So 10 plus 2, because 2 was indirect tax, minus 1, that was the subsidy. Finally, the burden that is there on consumer is of 11 rupees. Okay. So if GDP is being calculated on factor cost, that gives you the idea about the money value for goods and services produced in the economy, which is not getting changed because of any change in tax or subsidy. So if in order to have better estimate of GDP, factor cost is relevant. Okay, factor cost is necessary. But in order to estimate GDP at market price, the whole process becomes easier. So this is more accurate when it comes to comparing GDP, especially when we are talking about growth, because growth is actually about increase in production, while this particular GDP may change because of increase or decrease in income tax or subsidy, indirect tax and subsidies. So when we are trying to have better estimate of growth, it is better to adopt GDP FC, because that is not changing because of change in taxes or subsidy. That is changing because only of change in production, and that is something which determines growth ultimately. But this is easier to calculate. Okay, this is easier to calculate. This is a better estimate to go for comparison of growth, and this is actually better in terms of easy availability of data. Okay, because it is always easy to go for market price, to assess the market price for the calculation. Nevertheless, the second change which was made in the calculation of GDP was that GDP MP was adopted instead of GDP FC. But the second difference was this, that even when GDP MP was getting calculated, there was change in the calculation. There was something called basic price which was introduced. What is it? Basic price as a concept was introduced. Earlier, what was market price? Market price included factor cost plus net indirect taxes. Net indirect taxes means indirect taxes minus subsidy. Okay, net indirect taxes included indirect taxes minus subsidy. Now MP, that is new market price, is including FC plus net production taxes, plus NIT, net indirect taxes. That is factor cost. Earlier, market price was determined just by addition of net indirect taxes in factor cost. Now market price is being determined by adding net production taxes with FC along with NIT, that is net indirect tax. Okay, and this particular thing, that is factor cost plus net production tax, is basic price. Basic price. So what is basic price? Basic price is factor cost plus net production tax. Factor cost plus net production tax. Don't worry if it is a new term for you. And what is net production tax? Production tax minus production subsidy. Production tax minus production subsidy. Okay. Now understand what is production tax. There are two kinds of taxes, understand. Product taxes and production taxes. Product taxes and production taxes. What is happening here? Product tax means what? Product tax means that tax which is imposed on unit of production, or which is going to be determined by the units of production. Okay, what is the units of production? For example, excise tax which is imposed on manufacturing. So for example, this stylus is being produced, is being manufactured, and there is a tax on the value of output. Say for example, 100 is the value of output of this stylus, then 10% of output. That means if there is one marker, then 10% of 100 equals to 10 rupees. 10 rupees of tax will be imposed on this particular manufacturing. Now if I produce 10 stylus instead of one stylus, if I produce 10 stylus, That means 10% of 100 into 10. Getting it? So production tax, here it is, the example that I have taken is the excise duty, which has been replaced by GST now, is going to be determined, is going to be dependent upon the units that have been produced. Okay, units that have been produced. So for example, if I own a factory which is going to manufacture these styluses, then I'm going to pay production tax on the basis of the number of units of stylus that I'm going to manufacture. Okay, other than product tax, there is production tax. Now, this production tax is a tax which is not dependent upon unit of production, not dependent upon units of production. Okay, so what is the example of this tax? For example, if I own this manufacturing factory which manufactures these stylus, then I must have paid certain stamp duty, I must have paid certain registration charges. Okay, when I was trying to open this manufacturing factory, I went to the government, I said that I have opened this factory which is going to manufacture this stylus. Then government said that you have to pay this much amount of stamp duty, you have to pay this much amount of registration charges. Now stamp duty, registration charges, these kind of things, land revenue, these kind of things are not going to be dependent upon the units that I'm going to produce. Okay, so that is going to be a lump sum amount that I'm going to pay. So you can say that production tax is not going to involve, or is not going to be dependent upon the units of production. It is not going to be involved, not going to involve the units of production. It is going to be dependent, not going to be dependent upon the units that is going to produce. So what is the basic price? Basic price here is factor cost plus net production tax, that is production tax minus production subsidy. Production tax means that tax which is not dependent upon units which are going to be produced. Okay, so just like there is tax, then there can be a subsidy also. So I can be provided with a subsidy which is dependent upon units of production, that is called product subsidy. And then I can be provided with a subsidy which is not dependent, just because I have opened this particular factory which is manufacturing this stylus, and government may think that this is a very essential commodity which must be available to every individual. Then government may subsidize it, and it may just offer a lump sum amount to the to this manufacturing unit in form of production subsidy, that is not going to be dependent upon the units of production. So in that case, that will be called production subsidy. Okay, so factor cost plus production tax minus production subsidy is going to be called basic price. And what is market price then? The new market price in the new methodology, the market price in new methodology is factor cost plus net production tax plus NIT, net indirect tax. Okay, so that means factor cost plus production tax minus production subsidy plus product tax minus product subsidy, also called indirect tax minus subsidy. Okay, and in new methodology, what is GDP? How it is calculated? It is calculated on the basis of market price at constant price. And GDP MP, which is actually the new GDP, earlier GDP FC was the GDP. GDP MP was also calculated when GDP FC was actual GDP. But this was a side calculation. Now it is something which is going to be called GDP after 2015. Okay, GDP MP is actually the gross value addition, summation of gross value addition at basic price plus product taxes minus product subsidies. So what is GDP-MP? Gross value addition at basic price plus product taxes minus product subsidies. And what is gross value added? Understand, gross value added at basic price. You all say you all already understand basic price. Understand gross value added. Gross value added means, understand the term value added. See, one estimate of finding out what has been the GDP is to go for calculation of value addition in different sectors of the economy, and then adding the product taxes and subtracting the product subsidy to get GDP MP. So the new methodology says that GDP MP is going to be the real aggregate that is going to be called GDP of the country instead of GDP FC. And second thing, that GDP MP is going to be calculated or is going to be called this, that is summation of gross value addition at basic price plus product tax minus product subsidy. Okay. Now, what is gross value addition? For example, actually, gross value addition will refer to value addition in a particular sector. Okay, it may be automobile sector, it can be any sector. And what is the meaning of value addition? Value addition means the value of output minus value of input, or you can say value of non-factor input. Value of non-factor input. So that is called the value of. So for example, the factory which has produced this stylus must have ensured certain commodities in form of raw materials. So maybe that if this stylus is available in the market at 500 rupees, then the plastic and other things which have been employed to manufacture this was available at 100 rupees. Then the factory which produced this particular stylus out of the raw material actually did the value addition of 500 minus 100 rupees, that is 400 rupees. Okay, 400 rupees worth of value addition has been done by this company, by this manufacturing unit which produced this particular stylus. So this way, there will be the calculation of gross value addition of different sectors of the economy, and then all that will be added up to get the gross value addition of the economy. And then if we add product tax minus we subtract the product subsidy, then we get GDP MP. So these are the three basic changes that have been brought in the calculation methodology of new GDP. Okay, the next change was sources in the data. Okay, sources in the data. So what are the sources? Earlier, annual survey of industries was used as a source to collect data, and there were bodies like, for example, RBI was also used. So now in post 2015 era, when new methodology got adopted, we are not relying just on annual survey of industries. We are mainly relying on MCA 21, something called MCA 21, that is Ministry of Corporate Affairs 21. It is actually a e-governance initiative of Ministry of Corporate, where all the companies which are registered here are provided with 21-digit unique code, and we are going to see their output. So that becomes the source of data here. Other than this particular thing, we are also, the new methodology also has widened the sources of data by including other bodies. For example, earlier there was RBI. Now we have other regulatory institutions also. For example, PFRDA, IRDA, CB also. Then we have there has been the inclusion of local bodies also. Okay, so that also has that change has also taken place. Okay, are you getting this? I think this is clear. Now the next is this, that when there has been the widening of sources, certain other changes have also been made. For example, many services which were not part of earlier computational methodology have become part of this computational methodology, because these services were being employed in certain manufacturing activities. Now, in the earlier methodology, it was seen that there has been the contraction in manufacturing, while in the new methodology, it was seen that manufacturing in that particular year has witnessed 5.4% increase. So the reason that was cited there was that various services which are employed by manufacturing have been included, and that has actually resulted into increase in the manufacturing sector. percent growth percentage. Okay, so how it can happen that the old methodology is suggesting the contraction in manufacturing, while the new methodology is suggesting increase, or you can say positive growth in the manufacturing? That was mainly because many services whose output was not being included, was not made part of the GDP calculation, has been made part of GDP calculation because they are being employed by certain manufacturing units. Okay, so that was the change. Now, apart from the base year, the source of data, the computational methodology, it was the critics raised a question that why it is suggesting a kind of disproportionate increase in the GDP's growth rate, which is 6.9% instead of 4.7% in the year 2013-14. Okay, uh, this was because I told you that when you change the base year, definitely the things are going to have a jump here because of the changes in the prices in that particular base year. That is one reason. The other reason I told you that many manufacturing was one particular area where there was positive growth rate instead of contraction, which was suggested by previous methodology. That became also the reason why there was a high economic growth rate, higher economic growth rate. Thirdly, you can say that the criticism does not stand scrutiny to the fact that although this new methodology suggests economic growth to be 6.9% in a crisis, in a so-called crisis year, where it was 4.7% according to old methodology, but this is in line with the figures that have been suggested by IMF and World Bank. That means the new methodology actually aligns with the system that is suggested or that has been made a reference system by IMF as an institution. And these institutions also have gone for the calculation of India's GDP growth rate. And the figures there, the World Bank's figures and IMF figure for 2013-14 itself, actually are in line with the figures that we are able to reach through the adoption of the new methodology. Thirdly, it can also be said that the new methodology which has been adopted by Indian government has not been created by Indian government. The same reference is used by various other countries because that has been a reference made by IMF. Okay, so the changes that have been brought about by changing the base year, by making GDP MP to be the GDP of the country instead of GDP FC, then introducing basic price, then inclusion of those services which were contributing in the manufacturing sector, uh, then the widening of the data sources, all that is actually um, um, bringing a change in the GDP calculation methodology. And the criticism that India has been overestimating its GDP is not correct because the new methodology is very much in line, is very much in the convention, in line of the convention that has been set internationally, or the reference that has been made by IMF, and it is actually a global convention that has been followed by different countries. Okay, so the examiner actually expected you to have the most basic idea about the changes in the methodology, and I think there was the expectation that why this was an issue. So there you can say that although there has been revision, but this revision is very much in line with the international conventions that is uh, that has been made a reference point for different institutions, by different institutions, especially IMF, and has been adopted globally. Okay, so that is about the first question. Now, coming to the second question, distinguish between capital budget and revenue budget. Explain the components of both these budgets. See, direct question. Uh, the economy section has been rather easy this time because they are asking the direct question. Although, when there is a direct question, it becomes more challenging for you because now you have to give very specific points, and you also need to have sometimes very special points so that you could make your answer more and more marks fetching. Okay, so here you could have introduced your answer uh, with a good introduction on GDP, what is GDP, and then you would have elaborated in the body part that would have included all the methodological changes that have been brought about. In conclusion part, you might have given certain data uh, which actually was a kind of a source for the controversy because of the change in the methodology. But in the same conclusion part, you would have suggested that the changes which have been brought about are in line with the changes in the global conventions and the references which are used by multilateral institutions, for example, IMF. So that is the approach to deal with this question. Coming to this question, that is distinguish between capital budget and revenue budget. A direct question on budget, actually the annual financial statement, and there it says that explain the components of these budgets. Okay, a direct question. I think this was 10 marker question, and one can fetch very high marks. For example, one can score 6.5 to 7 marks, even more than that, in these kind of questions, because these are purely factual and test your factual knowledge. But that kind of factual knowledge actually involves the concepts also. Okay, so you can introduce your answer by uh, saying that what actually is budget and how that is made compulsory by the articles of the constitution. Okay, we're talking about annual financial statement here. So that is something that you should introduce your answer with. Then we can come to budget and its component. So budget consists of two components. First is revenue budget and capital budget. Or you can divide into budget receipts and expenditure. So there are two components, revenue budget and capital budget. And the second kind of classification can be there are two components. First is receipts and there is expenditure. So if you're adopting this kind of classification, then further you have revenue receipts, and then revenue expenditure. And in capital budget, you may have capital receipts and capital expenditure. Okay. So two things, revenue and capital. And here two things, receipts and expenditure. So receipts means incoming money. Incoming money, the money that is coming to the government. And expenditure means money that is being spent by the government. So these are the two terms. Revenue budget actually is dealing with those things which are recurring in nature. So, for example, revenue expenditure will involve that kind of expenditure which is recurring in nature, day to day expenditure. So, for example, salaries, then interest payments, then um, those payments which are regularly made uh, by the government. So, here revenue budget is going to deal with expenditure and receipts which is of recurring nature, that means which is uh, required in day to day activities and does not have any change, no change in asset or liability. Asset or liability. Okay, so for example, there can be revenue receipts. There can be two kinds of revenue receipts, tax revenue receipts and non-tax revenue receipts. Non-tax revenue receipts. Tax revenue receipts may include like GST, personal income tax, corporate income tax, securities transaction tax, then various other tax, very other kinds of tax. Non-tax receipts may include uh, penalties, fees, and all. Okay, so that the government receives money through penalties, through fees, and all. Then revenue expenditure, I told you that expenditure on expenditure on providing salaries, wages, expenditure on providing um, donations and all. So that is something that we account for revenue budget. Now, what about capital budget? This kind of expenditure and receipts is going to have a change in asset and liability. In asset and liability. Okay, so this was a very simple question. You just needed to come out with proper classification and then provide examples. So, for example, revenue receipts. What are revenue receipts? Revenue receipts are those receipts which either is going to decrease the asset or increase the liability. Okay, so for example, borrowings. Borrowings, it can be external borrowing or internal borrowing. External borrowing means borrowing from, say, institutions like IMF. Internal borrowings, say, for example, borrowings from RBI or borrowings from market. That is going to increase the liability. Okay, so capital receipts will necessarily either increase the liability or decrease the assets. So, for example, if there is disinvestment, okay, disinvestment of any public sector unit, or government is selling a part of its company to the private individuals, so that is disinvestment. That means what? Definitely there is a change in the asset is being reduced, there is decrease in the asset. Okay, if government is borrowing, that means if government is borrowing certain amount of money from IMF, that means it is increasing the liability of the government. Okay, so capital receipts will either increase the liability or will either decrease the assets. Okay, although when it comes to revenue budget, there is no change in the asset and liability of the government. Okay, similarly, just the opposite is the case with capital expenditure. So when government go for capital expenditure, again there is a change in asset and liability. But which kind of change? In capital receipts, you saw that there is change in this particular asset and liability, which is of this nature, that capital receipts will necessarily increase the liability and necessarily decrease the asset. Here, capital expenditure will increase the asset and decrease the liability. So, for example, if government is taking loan from IMF, that is going to that is a kind of receipt. So that is increasing the borrowing, increasing the liability of the government. But if government is offering loan, say for example, government is offering loan to Bhutan, or government is offering 10 million rupees of loan to Bhutan, that means what? That is a kind of asset which is being created. If it is offering loan, then it is a asset which is being created. At the same time, if government is paying 100 million or dollar of loan to the IMF, that means it is definitely the expenditure. But which kind of expenditure? Our liability with IMF has decreased if we have paid this loan back. So that will involve capital expenditure. Say, for example, government buys any particular asset. Okay, government builds any particular infrastructure. Government builds roads, transport facilities. That will definitely be the expenditure, but it will not be revenue expenditure. It will be capital expenditure. Okay, why? Because it is leading to the creation of assets. So it is increasing the asset of the government. Okay, it is increasing the asset in the economy. So government capital expenditure will definitely increase the asset. Either it will increase the asset or it will decrease the liability. So for example, if I take the example of public sector unit, then the dividends accruing from public sector unit is not going to change the asset and liability. They will definitely become part of non-tax receipts of the government. But if government sells any particular part of PSU, a percentage of PSU or complete PSU, definitely that will be a receipt, but that will not be a revenue receipt. That will be a capital receipt, because now the asset has been lost, the government's asset has been lost. Okay, so PSU is no more because it has been privatized. Although as a kind of receipt, money has come to the government in form of capital receipts, but there has been the decrease of asset. Okay, for example, if India is paying interest on the amount that it has borrowed from IMF, just the interest, Then paying of interest is an expenditure. It is not received because money is going out. Okay, money is being spent. That interest payment is expenditure. So which kind of expenditure it would be? It will be a capital expenditure or revenue expenditure. Paying of interest is not bringing any kind of change in the asset and liability of the country, and that is why it is a revenue expenditure. So payment of interest, I'm not talking about payment of principal amount, I'm talking about payment of interest, is not going to change the amount of that I have borrowed. So that is why it is going to be revenue expenditure. Okay, if I pay the loan back, then that will be a capital expenditure because that is decreasing my liability. Okay, so this is how you go for the classification of different components of budget. It was expected that you have a complete knowledge, conceptual clarity about what constitutes revenue budget, what constitutes revenue capital budgets, and how it is related to the changes in asset and liability. Then you should also have given the examples of revenue budget, deficit in this particular account, then deficit in this particular account. Deficit in this account is a serious situation because it shows that government is not able to take care of its day-to-day functioning, and for that also government needs to borrow. While if there is deficit in this particular account, that shows that maybe the government has borrowed loan or borrowed certain amount of money for asset creation. So definite deficit in this particular account, this particular component, is good or bad will depend upon the utilization of the money, while deficit in this particular account or this particular component of budget is always bad, or is considered always bad. So it was expected that other than the classification that will become part of your body of the answer, uh, you should also explain the different kinds of deficits in different kinds of components, different components that will prove that you have a comprehensive understanding of the classification of budget. Okay. Now, another direct question was there, that do you agree that Indian economy has recently experienced a V-shaped recovery? Give reasons in support of their answer. Okay, so these the questions were direct questions. Again, here it is a kind of direct questions if you have studied the current affairs or followed current affairs well before the examination. Okay, and also have attended say any regular classes where your mentor, your guide has taught about these particular issues. So again, this was a very easy thing to deal with. Do you agree that Indian economy has recently experienced V-shaped recovery? So it was very much in news, V-shaped recovery, and many kind of shapes of recovery were being discussed and talked about in different newspapers. And it is a no surprise that UPSC asked it. But UPSC is asking, focusing on this particular thing, that do you agree? Because it was contested. It was contested whether there is a V-shaped recovery or not. But then in the second part, give reasons in support of their answers. So if you say that yes, there has been a V-shaped recovery, then you have to provide reasons. And by reasons here, it is expected that you are going to provide certain data, certain facts, okay, to support your answer. What is V-shaped recovery? Understand what they are talking about. See, if I try to construct a graph, all that became news, all that became important because only because of this pandemic. Okay, so before pandemic, before 2020, when pandemic, when lockdown was imposed, India was witnessing was doing very good because we had a problem of cash crunch in certain financial institutions, but that problem was also being dealt with, and we started doing fairly good before pandemic. But then there was lockdown. So say for example, on y-axis I'm keeping GDP, and on y-axis I'm keeping time. Okay, so this may be the economic growth that we were having. Okay, and at this particular time period, at this particular time t, there was lockdown. Okay, there was lockdown. So what happened? Because there was lockdown, economic growth decreased. Okay, significantly. Economic growth decreased significantly. And when lockdown was removed, then situation changed. But if I just consider that if there would not have been any pandemic, then this would have been the trajectory of India's economic growth. Yes or no? Dotted line. So the trajectory of India's economic growth in pre-pandemic time. Yes or no? This was the time period when lockdown was imposed. If there would not have been any lockdown, then this curve shows that this would have been the trajectory. Yes, this is something that you can expect. So dotted lines show the trajectory that Indian economy would have followed if there would not have been any lockdown. Okay, because of lockdown, this came down. Economic growth came down considerably. V-shaped recovery would mean that the kind of recovery that is there in the economy is such that within a very short span of time, economy again reaches to that level which was there or which was expected from the economy in pre-pandemic era. Okay, so there was a lockdown, then there was stagnation in the economy, recession and all, and again there was a quick recovery and economic growth rate reached to its fullest potential as it was before the pandemic. Okay, so this is a V-shaped recovery. So was there a V-shaped recovery? Government official statements which came last year in January suggested that there are various reasons we can say that there has been V-shaped recovery. For example, there was tax collection, GST collection, then e-way bills, various other things. For example, there has been a change or increase in 20% in GDP's growth in quarter one in comparison to previous quarter in the previous year. That was also a reason given by certain experts that there was V-shaped recovery. Then there was another suggestion which came that Indian economy is the only economy in the previous financial year which witnessed economic growth in two consecutive quarters, and that is why we can say that there has been a complete V-shaped recovery. But all these figures and facts actually were contested because many experts said that just by going to certain data sets, we cannot conclude that the economy as a whole witnessed V-shaped recovery. Some experts said that because of the pandemic and because of the second wave, there has been not V-shaped recovery but W-shaped recovery. Okay, so what is this W-shaped recovery? See this. So, for example, this was the economic growth rate. And at that point, T1, lockdown was imposed. Otherwise, this would have been the trajectory. Okay. Now, the experts say that instead of V-shaped, we can say that there have been kind of W-shaped recovery. So, what is W-shaped recovery? W-shaped recovery is this, that because of the second wave that was there in time T2, again lockdown was imposed. And before the economy could recover fully well to reach to its previous level, again there was lockdown, and that is why again there was stagnation, recession. Okay, again there was negative economic growth, and now it will again take time for the economy to reach to its previous potential. Okay, so this has also been suggested. Now some say that there has not been W-shaped recovery. in some sectors there has been K-shaped recovery. So what is K-shaped recovery? So you needed to elaborate first on V-shaped recovery. What is V-shaped recovery? Yeah, it was expected that you provide an intro which is going to include, which is going to talk about the contemporary times. That is the time where Indian economy is facing the challenge of a pandemic, and then you must have described. It is was expected that you must describe what is V-shaped recovery by proper graph, and then provide the data sets which prove that yes, there has been V-shaped recovery on certain sectors. uh, Certain data sets suggest that, but that remains contested because various other experts say that because of various other factors there has been W-shaped recovery or K-shaped recovery or Z-shaped recovery. Some say there has been L-shaped recovery also, and it was expected that you provide reasons for that. Okay, so for W-shaped recovery, you were provided with the reason that because again there was a lockdown, and that became a factor because of decreasing in the economic growth. Okay, so next, K-shaped recovery. What is K-shaped recovery? Understand that it was expected that Indian economy is going to have not only V-shaped recovery, but kind of Z-shaped recovery. Okay, what is Z-shaped recovery? First understand Z-shaped recovery. GDP time. Okay, this is the GDP growth rate, and at that point, lockdown was imposed, and this would have been the trajectory. But here, because of lockdown, GDP growth rate came down. Now, various households who were not able to spend their money, they were not able to party, they were not able to organize the marriage functions, they were not able to organize their visits to salon. Okay, they were not able to go to cinema halls because of lockdown. When lockdown was removed, there was a pent up demand. That means they already had the money with them. That means their source of income did not go. What changed? That they could not spend their income, and that increased the pent up demand. Because of this pent up demand, when lockdown was removed, there was not only a GDP economic growth, which was only pre pandemic, actually, it crossed that particular barrier. Okay, and it crossed that particular barrier. Again, because of lockdown, it was again came down. So, what is happening here? Kind of jet shape is emerging. Okay, so this increase is because of pent up demand, and this decrease, because when pent up demand is going to be met, again it is going to stabilize. But now, because pandemic has not gone, it may come down also. So that is called jet shaped recovery. So that has also been seen in certain sectors. Okay, and because of V-shaped recovery in certain sectors, W-shaped recovery in certain sectors, jet-shaped recovery in certain sectors, it has been suggested that Indian economy has witnessed K-shaped recovery. That means different sectors have witnessed different levels of increase or decrease. Okay, so for example, a household which has not been affected when it comes to the sources of income, I'm talking about the top deciles of the population here, those who are already halves of the society, they have been disturbed by the lockdown only when it comes to the spending of the income and not in the source of the income. Okay, but when it comes to the bottom deciles of the economy, it is not only that they could not spend in the lockdown, but the very sources of income has also gone. Okay, so for example, if you are a barber working in a salon, then because of lockdown, people did not come to you twice or thrice, they came to you after 3 months. So yes, they came to you after 3 months, but they are not going to have three haircuts. Yes, in third month they are not going to have three haircuts, they are going to have one single haircut. So you permanently lost to earn the amount that you could have earned in by those two haircuts that were unavailable because of lockdown. So it was suggested that some things have been permanently destroyed in the when it comes to economic growth or production. There are things which have been permanently lost. Okay, so that is why some sectors that permanent loss has been witnessed, and in some sectors for some households there has been the lockdown has imposed restrictions whereby uh, their freedom to indulge in enterprise was greatly affected. And it was not only spending which was affected but also the source of income. Okay, so yes, that is the difference. So there has been the K-shaped recovery also, and this means that different sectors of the economy and different segments of the population witness different amount of or different level of growth, or some witness contraction or other witnessed increase, okay, or expansion. So this must be kept in mind while answering the question. Okay, so we don't have much time here to discuss all the questions. So let us see the fourth question. Investment in infrastructure is essential. Again, you can see that these are very easy questions if you have proper understanding of the basic concepts. Okay, so we will make sure here that uh, you understand all the basic things of the economics. Only then you can understand that when you are going to write answer, although it is a general question, but you must be able to employ the vocabulary, the terminologies which are used in these when these topics are discussed. Examiner looks for those terminologies. Okay, examiner looks for those terminologies, and that is why you should be able to employ that. So it will come naturally to you if you are thorough with the whole syllabus and the whole lecture plan that has been designed for your perusal. Okay, so lastly, we are going to take this question. Investment in infrastructure is essential for more rapid and inclusive economic growth. Discuss in light of India's experience. Okay, a direct question which actually asks you to relate the investment in infrastructure with rapid and inclusive economic growth. I told you inclusive economic growth is very important topic of UPSC. So when I was discussing the syllabus, I already explained what is inclusive growth. Inclusive growth would mean a growth, a kind of economic growth, which ensures that every section of society is able to participate in the organization of growth. That has been the definition given by United Nations Development Program, that every section of society is able to participate in the organization of growth, that is able to participate in the production process and is getting benefited from it. Okay, so that is what we know as inclusive growth. So what is required for inclusive growth? That people could become capable of taking part in the production process, and while they are becoming capable, or while they are becoming capable of taking part in the production process, what we actually mean is that they could become employable. Okay, we have already seen that. Now, when they became employable, the other thing which is required is that they should also get employment opportunities. So, if I become employable, I should also get employment opportunities. So, that is also required. So, for inclusive growth, employment generation, that is increasing the number of employment avenues, and second, employability of the people. Two things are to be ensured. Okay, when you invest in infrastructure, you can analyze this question by classifying different sectors. So, for example, invest in agriculture would increase the agricultural produce of the country, will provide security to the farmers. Okay, when farmers are secure, when they are getting proper remuneration, their development is ensured. When they are getting proper price, fair price to their produce. So, for example, if you build better um, upstream and downstream sources whereby backward and forward linkages are there, where you build proper storage facilities for keeping the agricultural produce, then all that ensures that farmers get fair price for their produce. Okay, and same is true for different sectors of the economy. For example, if service sector is provided with better infrastructure, better broadband telecommunication services, then that will be able to do uh, great will be able to increase the productivity. And if service sector is able to improve the productivity, that means it is not only the employees who are it is not only the labor force employed in the service sector which is going to be benefited, but if broadband telecommunication software services, ICT, information communication technology services are being made better in the economy, and they are becoming better because of the investment in infrastructure in that sector, and uh, also because these services are needed not only by the laborers or the labor force employed in service sector but the people at large, then everyone will be able to contribute well in the economic process, that means inclusive growth is taking place. That means they are being benefited because of inclusive growth, because of increased productivity, and also are able to participate in the organization of growth. Similarly, if you talk about industries, then manufacturing has a good scope for employing large number of labor force. So if there is investment in those manufacturing industries, in more those manufacturing sectors which are able to employ large chunk of labor force, then that would help that a large chunk of labor force which is still employed in agriculture in disguised unemployment form could make a forward transition towards manufacturing. That will do what? That will is going to increase their wages. That is going to ensure that now they get proper wages, and that will ensure that they are able to move uh, they are able to make a forward transition towards higher sectors of the economy. So that way, large chunk of labor force is going to be benefited by investment in those manufacturing sectors, especially those sectors which do not require very high skilled labor force. Okay, similarly, investment in infrastructure is going to ensure even development of the country. Okay, so inequality or regional inequality is one of the socio-economic feature of India. So for example, there is difference between North India and South India, Northeast India and rest of India, rural India and urban India. That is one factor that makes India an underdeveloping economy. If you go for investment in infrastructure, if you build better roads, waterways, bullet trains, transportation and logistical cost comes down, then even development or regional even development will be ensured. That means all round development of the country will be ensured, that all regions of the country will be able to benefit from the increased growth, and will all the population of the country residing in different parts of the country will be able to participate in the organization of growth. So that will be ensured by better infrastructure. Okay, so for example, if you reduce the distance between, say, West India and East India and Northeast India, then people residing in Northeast India and East India will be benefited from the industrialization and the economic growth that is happening in the western part of the country. Okay, so better infrastructure is going to make them capable, is going to make a lot of people employable, and will also generate employment opportunities. And that is actually what is needed for inclusive growth. You have already understood it. Okay, so that is the case for industries. Then you can also talk about various other sectors. For example, when you talk about agriculture, you can also include agriculture marketing. When you talk about uh, uh, agriculture, you can also talk about allied activities. Okay, so this is how you have to approach. You can divide the answers into different segments, and you can adopt this particular method. Okay, other than that, there were questions on agriculture. So for example, this was the question on land reforms, that how did land reforms in some parts of the country help to improve the socio-economic conditions of marginal and small farmers. Okay, so how did it improve? So, the question assumes that yes, it improved. So what is land reforms? Land reforms is a set of initiatives taken in the direction of ensuring abolition of jamidari, tenancy reforms, land ceiling and cooperatives, and how they improved the socio-economic conditions. So they improved not only they improved a great section of population not only economically but also socially, because you know that in India, land is associated not only with economic condition but also a status symbol. It is also deciding a social status of the country, of a section of the society. Actually, those class which have been considered the upper class in our society are actually the class which have been holding control over land. Okay, so when there have been land reforms, when there have been tenancy reforms, when there has been abolition of jamidari, a great number of people came to have control over land. So that improved their economic conditions, but that did not improve their economic conditions only, but also improved their social status. Social status also helped in their political mobilization. So after independence, after land reforms, there have been the political mobilization of scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and OBC sections. So land reforms was one of the factor behind that. Okay, so that is how you have to approach this question. So this again was very direct and very easy if you have proper understanding of land reforms. This was also very good question: how and to what extent would micro irrigation will help in solving the India's water crisis. So irrigation has been a problem in India, and water scarcity with the problem of irrigation becomes a very important issue in Indian agriculture, and micro irrigation helps to deal with that problem. So the question was based on this particular aspect. Okay, so here you needed to be aware about the water crisis in the country, different types of irrigation system that was given in the syllabus, and how micro irrigation can resolve the situation. Okay, so this was actually the question. What are the present challenges before crop diversification? How do emerging technologies provide opportunity for crop diversification? Now there are various ways how we are going to ensure the farmers security. Okay, one way of securing the farmers income is crop diversification, because that is going to give him access to different types of crop produce, and also going to guarantee that if one kind of produce is 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 not giving him proper returns, then because of crop diversification, his income is secured. So this actually focuses on that particular aspect of agriculture. And emerging technologies that we have going to talk about are actually related to crop diversification. So what are those emerging technologies and how they have been helping crop diversification? That was the area of focus. So yes, when we study crop diversification that has been given in the syllabus, we talk about emerging technologies which actually are helping the farmers to diversify their produce. Okay, so these technologies, when are employed in field, actually provide a kind of security to the income. So that was the focus, and again a very easy and very direct question. You just have to name 4 or 5 technologies which are being employed by the farmers for crop diversification. Now, what are the salient features of National Food Security Act? Again, a direct question, but it was not a question based on current affairs. I told you that they have been asking on contemporary issues. So, contemporary issue, Food Security Act is actually a contemporary issue. So, that is why you are suggested to follow not only the current affairs of one year, but also the contemporary issues. So for example, one question was from 2015, the changes that was brought in 2015, and this question was from 2013. Okay, so almost 8 to 9 years ago, the thing uh, uh, that was changed, that has been asked by UPSC. Okay, and how has the food security bill helped in eliminating hunger and malnutrition in India? So a well settled debate is there with regard to the food security, and how Food Security Act, which is actually involving um, um, the targeting of the beneficiaries through socioeconomic caste census. Okay, another feature, another change that has been brought about with identification of beneficiaries, that is being employed here. Again, a direct question. So you saw that when there are questions on economics, they are asking for conceptual clarity, and when there are questions on agriculture, again conceptually they are going to be easy, but they are based more on information, so understanding the issues there. Okay, so this required understanding of socioeconomic conditions, how they have been brought about, a change in land through land reforms. Then this required issue of micro irrigation. Okay, how that is done, then how that can help. This was question crop diversification, so micro irrigation, crop diversification, land reforms, and food security. These were the 4 topics. So all these 4 topics are studied in very good detail in economics classes. So these questions are rather easy. Okay, so this time UPSC has been very easy when it comes to economics, but every single year, whenever they ask questions on economics, if you have studied economics and Indian economy, when you have studied the concepts properly, when you have understood the things properly, you have followed the current affairs, you know about all the contemporary issues, it is always easy to answer these questions. Okay, with the paucity of time, I am compelled to stop the discussion here, although we can go on discussing the questions uh, for longer period of time. So next time, if this discussion takes place, I'm going to address these questions in detail. Although the first part of the questions have been answered well, second part, I just tried to give you proper understanding that how you have to approach, and from which section of the syllabus these have been asked. Okay, so that was all for this discussion. Thank you very much.